Good morning, everyone. Bennett, thanks for not butchering my last name. It's not easy. It's Indian. Appreciate that. I hope everyone had their breakfast this morning because I'm going to have some contradicting thoughts to Sachin's speech a bit, and I'll explain why that's so, right? So what really we do in Fivetran is focus on how you can get your ROI out of your data. And we see a lot of organizations go down this path, being digital natives or traditional enterprise. And I'll be covering some examples today so that we can talk about it. So just a quick introduction from myself. I initially came on from Tableau, so focused on data visualization for a couple of years. Before that, did a lot of government projects with Accenture, on data side also, and then hopped over to Fivetran to focus on data movement itself. So ability to move data from your source to target and help bridge that on-prem to cloud journey for a lot of customers itself. So that's where I've been focusing my last 2 years in Fivetran. And we've seen amazing growth across organizations like Property Guru to telcos using us for various amount of data movement needs itself. So 3 takeaways I want you to understand today would be what is the cost of cost of stale data for you? How do you then unlock the ROIs from your data? That's one key. And some homework for you to think about these sources. So it's a never analytical speech if you don't have some numbers being shown. So Gartner's always reference, and what we've always seen is that 97% of data sits unused in an organization. And that's okay, but then you start asking the question, right? The challenge that your organization has is a lot of data from myriads of sources that can be on the cloud, on-premise, and how do you then understand the opportunity because you're only using 3% of that data? And do you have use cases for the rest of the opportunity? And even for that 3% of data, what we have seen is that organizations' data infrastructure is just not enough to meet these requirements as they grow. Because predominantly what has happened is that organizations have used a very legacy approach when we look at ETL itself. And that was because monolithic data warehouses or on-premise were really expensive. So for you to it was only key for you to bring in the right appropriate data, which means that you would then clean your data first before you bring it into your target database to do analytical reporting. But with the power of moving away from a CapEx model to a consumption-based model with a lot of the hyperscalers, organizations have realized that most of the bottleneck exists a lot in the transformation piece. I've been through this journey personally when you go through this never-ending ETL cycle with organizations where you scope out your requirements and then you start building these pipelines, and in 2 months, if you're fast enough to build this and get access to these data sources, you've realized the business requirements have tweaked, you go back to your source, you go through this journey until your user is happy or one of you starts tearing each other's hair out. So this is a very common problem that we see, and we see a lot of these softwares also using different languages, different workflows, and you have a very strong vendor lock-in itself. And you would have a team that requires to be trained for 3 to 6 months, and you need someone that is good enough to understand this software. And when things break, if that person is not around, then it becomes a bottleneck issue also across. So really very typical ETL cycle for analytical reporting or operational reporting. So as I mentioned, the opportunity for one of my customers was very interesting. For them to get this data out from multiple SAP systems, SAP was never designed for data to leave to the cloud. It's an ERP system. But for them to bring that data out to the cloud, it took them close to 3 months just to harmonize this data. And the fastest they could do it, if the manager starts pushing for the users, will be 72 hours. And then the question starts asking, right? Go back to the slide where the opportunity is. When the opportunity for you then becomes real-time analytics, how do you then shift your data infrastructure to support this? So for these folks, what they saw a lot of value is that all my different BUs are ordering different things on my SAP ERP. If I have real-time analytics, I can start provisioning across my BUs and let them use the appropriate SKUs that they require for ordering stuff. So Analytical provided them the ability to save close to $10 million in cost savings across. So what we helped them to do was really bring the SAP data out to their BI solution so that they can transform data really quickly and they can see things real time. So for them, if one BU is using this, they could easily transfer that assets across, not every BU manager ordering every time the inventory is low. So this is real-time analytics use cases that you see with legacy systems that you do not want to change, because they are in your organization, and it's very hard. You need to move them across. And when we look at data engineer teams, when the opportunity is there, organizations who have invested in data teams, typically we see the three biggest pain points that really holds their ROI back. Like the monolithic systems that are being used are typically old, and they also grapple with the new systems like Salesforce, Zendesk that are being brought. Then data engineers spend close to 60 to 70% of their time really trying to build these data pipelines to these source systems to extract data out of that. And a lot of this is really highly reliant on the skill. So your data engineer then spends a lot of their time doing this, I would call low value work, when a lot of this can be automated and they can be focused on answering the real business questions for the organization and actually doing data modeling on the cloud data warehouse. And what we've seen also that is a kind of a product of this ETL process is that when you're doing ETL, you're pulling a lot of data that's coming in from your production databases. When you try to move that to a real-time focus, you start putting a lot of stress on your production database. When you start pulling it every 5 minutes, you will start seeing I/O type of stress on your bandwidth or your network. So there's a bottleneck from a data engineer point of view also, because these systems are quite old. I'm talking about your Oracles or your on-premise systems. So these three pain points then start happening. And then when you look at a data engineer or manager, they have the opportunity to just either do two things: automate it, use a software, or just hire more data engineers to do this, continuously do this work. And this is what we've done in Fivetran. We surveyed close to 1,800 of our companies. 50 plus organizations have 11 or more data sources. So as I was mentioning, and a lot of the analysts is spending close to 90% of their time doing integration work. This then takes away their effort from really maximizing their ROI to implement profit-driven ideas that the business actually cares about. So what we see as a business for data infrastructure, a lot of the high resources wasted on pipelines itself. And when we look at the ETL approach earlier, what we hear, and we will hear a lot of folks talk about this today, is what we call the modern data stack. So the modern data stack essentially is a focus on helping you to use, for example, BigQuery or Snowflake or Databricks or Fivetran to It's fully SaaS, which means it's a consumption-based model, and it takes you little or no configuration from an infrastructure point of view to set it up, and it's fully hosted on the cloud. So for you to analyze and understand your use case, it's very, very quick for you to act on it. So these are some of the themes you would see that are quite common in the modern data stack itself. A bit more features. When you look at the modern data stack, the philosophy has been on ELT, which is extract, load, and transform. When you have a data source and use case that you want to approach it with, it's always going to be cloud first, and predominantly is SQL and C based. And it's fully managed, means you do not need to care about provisioning, you do not need to care about auto-scaling, it's automatically done for you as a business. And why the MDS, right? When you look at data pipelining or ingestion or data warehousing or data cataloging, it's because speed and cost of infrastructure to set up is important for organizations to take really quick value of the use cases that are there right now. So if you don't act upon these opportunities as of right now, then it's going to be taken over by one of your competitors. I think one of the biggest points, as I mentioned, it allows your team to then focus on the real value add of your organization, which is talking to the business stakeholders, answering those questions that they require from an ELT approach and from an MDS point of view. And we've seen this across quite a lot. A lot of our customers across the world has moved to the modern data stack. So they have either augmented their current infrastructure, or they have two running, essentially one for operational reporting and one to feed a lot of their analytical workloads, so that they can also continue and do a lot of their AI ML type of workloads. So I've talked a bit about what we call the modern data stack, right? And I just wanted to take some time to kind of break it down. What does that mean, right? On the left, you have all of your sources that come in from your monolithic databases. You have an ingestion tool that brings all of that through change data capture, which allows you to put very little or no stress on your source system, or bring all that data into a hyperscaler. Could be Databricks, could be AWS, could be Azure. With that, then you have the ability to use operational type of workloads, like your AI ML tool to start transforming that. And you also have your governance if you need to add that on. And at the end, the output, that is key. If you look at that, that's all centralized from one point of contact to multiple different use cases. So down to your end users who are keen to use Excel for reporting, they could use that. If they're looking at embedded analytics to power their external customers' use cases, you have the capability to use a tool. And then, of course, BI, which is very common. We see that across. And even reverse ETL. How do you then bring this clean data back into your operational system to answer your use case? For example, if you have a third-party application that's generating a lot of insights and you want to augment that back into your Salesforce, how do you do that? You have reverse ETL to do that. So all of the best part of the cloud data, modern data stack is that a lot of these parts can then be delineated in the future, and all of them are consumption-based essentially. So quick what Fivetran does. I don't know why my SAP HANA logo has kind of run away there. But what we do as a business is we basically move data from operational data systems. So example, your DB2, your Oracles, your Postgres, your SAP. We help replicate all of those tables directly into your target so that you can focus on doing data sharing, BI, operational system, and build your products. So we are a change data capture tool itself. And why change data capture, which is focused? Because when we look at replicating data from a source, especially a very tricky source, what we've seen is that log-based replication is probably the least intrusive method of replication. It's secure, it's real-time, and it's putting very little source impact on your system. So customers, for example, who have an MES manufacturing server running in their manufacturing plant, they could leverage this to replicate data out of that to start answering a lot of their AI ML workloads. And we do this for 200 different sources, whether your business is on the marketing side, finance side, we see a lot of ERP, or even, for example, some customers who are like doing HR analytics, Workday, for example, a system to bring that data out. We support all of these sources natively, and it's a plug and play from a SaaS tool perspective. And we also have multiple ways of deploying this solution across. So for some of our customers, we deploy it onto their on-premise assets or on their cloud VMs internally within your environment to replicate data coming in from a lot of replication softwares. And it's important to understand, like, some of our customers that we work with, they are huge transactional customers which generate close to 500, 600 gigabytes of data per hour even. So for them to have something that is replicating data quick and real time is very important from a lot of these source systems. So we have the ability to do what we call change data capture from log-based CDC methods. So just to give a scale, we have around 25,000 pipelines set up for 400 plus enterprise customers, and they're doing a huge amount of change data volume. And this is because it's transactional systems coming in from IoT devices or even MES data. So it's important to keep that update going. And one of the best parts, I see 3 logos here that I think 2 of them will always fight and always never agree with each other, which is Databricks and Snowflake, both really good softwares. But they've all agreed that Fivetran has been one of their data ingestion partners of the year. And really, why is that the case? It's because as a service, we have close to 300 data engineers maintaining these pipelines for 6,500 customers. And as a platform, we give you that guarantee that your source to target is always going to be delivered. And just to give you a scale, we are doing close to 2,000 terabytes of data monthly just to move from source to target. This is just incremental change itself. So we do this for a large base of customers, and customers put it on entrust us with that ability to make sure the data from source to target is always going to be correct. Some interesting case studies on how they have maximized ROI. I think this is a very good example to show you. For example, if you have an Oracle database that's transactionally heavy, how do you then bring that data out real time So for BP, which most of us know, an oil and gas company, for them, they were doing a lot of their replication needs on ETL, which is T+1, T-1. So for them to move to real time means they can start unlocking a lot of their AI ML that they require from their databases. One of my customers I've worked with is AIS in Thailand. We see a lot of organizations trying to controversially move away from Oracle and move to an open source standard for their databases that's on-premise. And just to give you some scale, a lot of them are trying to reduce their total cost of ownership by moving across to an open source tool. And for them, they had large tables that are transactionally heavy. And for them to bring their data out to Postgres has been a challenge. And if you do that over a migration period, you would have to do a parallel type of migration or a kind of a big bang approach. What Fivetran has provided them is the ability to do continuous replication from source to target. So why they are able to do their day-in BU activities and also continue their migration, making sure their Oracle and Postgres is always in sync. So this allows them to have consistency when they do their migration across to different source systems. So this is a TCO reduction and ROI kind of increase. And there's also a lot of variation, right? Like, for example, AirAsia, during COVID, their business was not doing well because they were an airlines company. So Tony Fernandez came out and launched Super App. For Super App, they needed to tie in data that's coming in from digital marketing sources. You're spending all of this ROI, all this ad data. How do you know that's being converted as your organic channel? With a data warehouse and an ingestion tool, we're able to pull data coming in from their Instagram ads to advertise to users that, okay, so for 4,000 of my users, they actually came in from my ads. Because tracking this is actually pretty tough, turns out to be. And how do you then tie it to your LTV costs of your acquisition of customer so that you understand, I'm paying Facebook and Instagram this much of money, I'm actually getting a conversion coming in for my downloads and my users. So this is some very interesting use cases that I wanted to leave you guys with on how you can kind of generate ROI for even folks that have applications in, like I would say, legacy organizations. So last but not least, I want you to think of how you can tap into these data silos to maximize your ROI. Sources that are generally tricky, old or new, do you have these sources? Come have a chat with us. We're happy to talk to you and give you a very clear example of what can be done and what can't be done, and what are the limitations and what we do well in. Any questions? I'm happy to take any questions here on Fivetran or etc. So, it's one in the back. We just got 2 minutes left, I think. Are we on a schedule? Okay.
Great presentation, Seyan. I will definitely not mispronounce your last name because I'm also of Indian origin. I run a venture builder. We are modeling alternative assets. We are using both structured and unstructured data. And I was wondering if your tool allows scraping of data, like from public sources, like Twitter tweets, because often that is a source of data, right? And then you can, so for example, we want to see sentiment about a company or a startup, right? And alternative asset data is very hard to find. I mean, there are sources, but those sources are usually outdated. And most of the up-to-date information is on Twitter, or recently we have a new competitor to Twitter. You all probably know the name. That's trending very fast, right? It's on Instagram. So if you have any thoughts on that and how your tool can process unstructured data from public sources, especially scraping, without getting banned, that will be great.
Yeah, so this is always a clear misconception. I will just come back to this. So we don't do scraping or collection from source that are public. We do from your ad account. So some of my customers, they have 40 to 50 different Facebook ad accounts, and they have to log in to look at what the cost per acquisition was for each of their campaigns. So we're actually pulling from the Facebook API of your specific accounts. There are quite a lot of web scraping tools in the market that actually support these type of use cases. For unstructured data, we support data sources that are coming from NoSQL and also from your API tabs, which is also unstructured data itself. And we land that in a normalized schema for you to understand and use SQL to transform it itself. So not a total fit, but if you're trying to do campaign and analysis, that's where we come in, not from a data collection point of view itself. I think there's one more question.
Hey, thanks, Ivan. That's a great presentation. Myself, Jaswinder. Just looking that you mentioned a lot of things about doing ETL and getting data out of from your on-premise system, putting over the cloud. There's a very important question, something it's very hard to manage is on the data lineage stuff and getting the governance on top of it. So is it something which is also included in that one?
Yeah.
On lineage stuff?
So that's a very good question, right? Because if you go back to here, you need data that's coming in first so that you can start understanding. And that's where we work with partners like Alation, right? For when we bring the data into your warehouse, it's garbage in, garbage out, if that's a clear example. But with a tool like Alation, that you have the capability to really drive those data cataloging. But if you don't even have the data there, then it's very hard for you to even understand. So as I think one of the best part of the modern data stack, every one of these solutions here do one single product, and we do it extremely well. And that's also a bad side, means you have to manage quite a lot of vendors, but you have the capability to work with the best of the breed. So when we look at, like, for example, data cataloging or data governance, we don't do that. We leave it to someone else to do, and we just focus on really moving data from source to target and doing it as the most efficient and reliable way itself. So if your source information is being replicated at target, we'll make sure that replication is correct. Not one column is missing or one row is missing. All of that is done by us itself as a SaaS solution. And when we look at like data governance tools, we also plug into them to provide metadata so that they can start feeding a lot of their governance models itself. So in a short thing, no, we don't do that, but there's a lot of other tools in the market that do that itself. Cool. Any other questions? I don't think so. Back to you, Bennett. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this.
Account Executive Fivetran, a big warm round of applause for on-ground insights and real-time knowledge as well.